Okay, how to make a sourdough. First thing we got to do before we do anything else, several hours before we get started, we got to feed this thing, our starter. Very, very important. We want to get it nice and bubbly. See how this is all bubbling up here? That's what we want. So the next step we're going to do, I've got 1 cup of water in here. It's ready to go. And we're going to add some starter. So I've got it on a set of scales, I've zeroed it out. I'm going to add 50 grams roughly. It doesn't matter if it's more, but you probably don't want much less. Okay, so we've got this nice white solution. I'm going to add 1 cup of flour into this, and we're going to make what they call a pre-ferment. So this flour is a mixture of what we wanted, the 4 scoops or 4 cups of normal flour and 1 cup of spelt, whole grain spelt that is. There we are, so you see it's still running. Doesn't matter if there's lumps in it, it's fine. The whole goal of this literally is to let it pre-ferment. So that bit of desiccant or starter yeast that we have in there is now going to start to eat into that. And we'll know when it's ready, it'll start bubbling a little bit. And once it's at that point, the more bubbles, the better, the more activated it is. Then we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. While we're waiting for that to happen, we're going to mix our salt into our flour. And then we're going to add our butter into there. Now the butter's going to give the bread a nice rich content into it. So let me get this done, I'll come back. So all I've done is just dice the butter up a little bit with a fork. It's got to be room temperature. Makes it hard if you don't. And in we go. Now we've kind of got no option. Now's the time we start getting our fingers dirty. Alright, when you're mixing this, you'll find you've got to get in there and rub the flour into it. So you can see the flour clumps around the flour and you've got to squash it through. Okay, so we're waiting for this to start bubbling. I'm just going to put some Glad wrap around it and let me talk to you about a few things. Variations of the flour. There's infinite numbers. Variations. You've got spelt flour, rye flour, coconut flour, all different types. And you'll find each type varies with the amount of protein it has in it, and that's what the yeasts are feeding on. So you're going to keep trying, and what you'll find is when you start mixing it, each flour will absorb water at a different rate. So everyone keeps asking, well, what's the water ratios that you use? How do you use them? It's all about feel. You get a bit of an idea. So I know what I've got here today. The first loaf we made, this one here, quite delicious. But I found with the water ratio that I used was a bit soft. So hence, that's why you got this more flat look. You can see, it's bubbled up in the center, but out the edges it's a bit low. So we're going to try this one with a little bit more height all around, look more like a traditional loaf. So the idea will be this time I'm going to use a little bit less water. If I still think it's a little bit sloppy, if you like, or not as tense tight as it could be, I'm going to add some more flour into it and keep throwing it in till I feel it's firm enough. And that's all you can do. You'll get to know the feel. It's not a thing that you can do overnight. I've been doing this now for probably about 5 years, and I still love making the stuff. So anyway, we'll come back shortly. Okay, we're back. It's been about 2 hours. If you look in there, let me get this right, there it is. You can see the bubbles. Let me try and get this a little bit closer. You can see the little bubbles coming up in through there. There's quite a few of them now. So that's ready to go. So we're going to add the flour that's got the salt and the butter mixed in with it, straight in. And because I've got the water pretty measured out pretty quickly, I'm just going to pour it in. I'm going to make a little flat spot in the middle. In it goes. So you can see me mixing it up in here. She gets quite clunky. There's still stuff on the bottom that's hasn't formed into it, a little bit dry, but that's what you want. You just want to keep mixing it in. The easiest way, despite the hands getting like this, with olive oil on it, just squash it through. It just forces the mix to blend better. Okay, so I've got it pretty well blended. Scraped it off my hands and then gave my hands a bit of a wash so they can run the camera mainly. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to sprinkle some flour onto this board, drop this onto there and start kneading it. Okay, as that dries out, a little bit more on there. Okay, I'm pushing down with the palms, bringing it back up, pushing down with the palms, folding sides in, pushing down and pushing down. Every now and then, a bit of flour on it to stop the sticking. Change direction so you're pushing the other way and give it a good working. Alright, so we've got this ready. Given the bowl a nice clean out. I'm just going to put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom and rub it around. This does help it prevent a little bit of sticking on the bottom when we get it out after it's done its first rise. Okay, so we get it there. Now one of the things I do, try and get because this will start to stick, I just push side to side and bring it up in my hand. So all it is, slap that way, that way, that way, that way as you're raising hands. And you bring it up. But then, into the bowl, just put it down the bottom there. A little bit of olive oil on top because it will expand, push up on the sides, and we just don't, sticking is bad. Because effectively from now on, you don't want to tear the dough because there's carbon dioxide building up inside of that as a chemical process. That's what happens when the yeast starts devouring the protein in the flour. It produces carbon dioxide. And it's those bubbles that you find in bread. That's the process. So, okay, so that's there ready to go. I'm going to put some plastic on this. I'm going to leave it out. I'm not going to put it into the fridge for an extended period of time. You can do. It doesn't make it devour the yeast quicker. In fact, it slows it right down. But it seems to add some flavour, and you can leave it in there quite a long time. You know, it's not unusual to be able to leave it in there for 48 hours on the first rise. Okay, here we are. So it's the following morning. It's been about 12 hours, maybe 14 hours. As you can see, sorry, dogs are there. As you can see, it hasn't risen a lot. Don't panic, it's not an issue. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to scrape this out onto the board and we're going to fold it. Let's just get straight into it. So a bit of flour onto the board, onto your hands. Don't worry about the olive oil in there, it's fine. But the key thing again, we don't want to tear it. And out she comes. As we're folding this, I'd like to sort of put it on there, help soak up some of the olive oil, which is fine. And we flatten it out. We'll tear a bit, don't panic, it's not an issue. Alright, and we're going to sprinkle little bits, that's baking soda. So this reacts with the acidity of the dough. Starts to create more carbon dioxide, the growing stuff. That's what we want. You can see this is how soft and pliable it is. Okay, we're getting close now. You can feel, I don't know if you can see it, but it's getting harder to spread out. That's what happens when you fold it. It firms up. Okay, I'm just going to do this one last fold there. Okay, now we're going to create our shape. Okay, you notice how I just pull that over back on itself. Now this can be a bit tricky. So I want a little bit of flour on there so it doesn't grab and tear. And what we're going to try to do is stretch this. Okay, so we're going to go for a shape. I'm going to show you two ways to put it in the oven, or prepare it, sorry, to rise for the oven. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to set it there, put our hands at the back and try and pull it under as the front of the skin here starts to stretch. A bit difficult to see. There we are. So you just want a little bit of flour on there. The first few ones I was slipping, and there we are, she's starting to stretch. You can almost see it wanting to tear in several spots. Now we're going to do it on the side. Comes out. Now, some people like a nice round dough. That's it. And what we've got then is that, and you'll see the joints underneath. You keep it down there so that it seals on the bottom when you put it in there, and the gas doesn't escape. It actually tries to blow up or expand. Roll it across there. Tucking back under. Okay, now that's ready to go. Now, if you do a bit of cooking, these things, I've forgotten the name, but basically a cane basket with a cloth liner. The cloth liner comes off. What you do, give it a layer of flour in there, just to coat it, and we'll plonk it into there. The other way, and how you end up cooking it anyway, is you can sit it on some baking paper in here and put logs, or not logs, bottles, things like that in there to stop it from going outwards, to try and force it to go that way. Now, I'm just going to plonk that in there, place a wet towel over it, and let it sit there for probably another 6 to 8 hours or something to that effect, until I'm happy with the amount of rise it's got. And then we'll prep it and put it in the oven. Alright, that's it so far. Okay, so it's risen a little bit more, if you look carefully. I think it's ready. So here's the oven setup. We've got the baking stone about the middle of the oven. Now we're going to put our bread in on a tray with some baking paper in it, just so that there's no sticking or anything like that. But we're still going to get that direct heat transfer from the stone. The idea of the stone is it takes a bit more to heat up, but it holds heat better. So when we open the door and put our bread in, the contact of this straight to the tray will start heating the tray up directly on the base, and that's going to solidify our base to stop the bread falling out to the side. It does work. I've had breads before I got the stone roll out over the side of my tray. Now down below here we've got a tray, and we're going to pour water straight into that. Once it's hot, it's going to create the steam, and the idea of the steam is to allow the outside that hasn't been heated up directly by the stone, the outside of that bread to stay softer longer, so it can rise more instead of condensing and compressing the little bubbles that are inside. We're also going to set it up. We're going to set it up as high a temperature as we possibly can at 250 degrees. That's as far as this oven goes. And we're going to leave it there. When we turn the oven on, put the bread in, we're going to leave it there for about 6 minutes at that temperature, and then we're going to dial it back to about 190. Okay, I'm just getting ready to put this in the oven. So the moment I take the dough out of this basket, gravity's going to want to flatten it out, so I've got to work quickly. So a couple of tools that I'm going to need. One, just a little razor blade. This is a solution of apricot jam and maybe a teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons of water, and just isolate it up. And it works really good for basting this and giving it that glistening type look. Okay, it also helps hold on the sesame seeds. Okay, so I'm going to put this into here, go like crazy, baste it, sprinkle the sesame seeds on it, and then I'm going to slice it with the razor blade. Now a lot of people think that people just randomly slice. It's not. So you go from diagonally opposite corners and then keep the same parallel lines you do. So we'll probably do 3 or 4, maybe 5 small little lines in across this. Okay, and the idea of that is so that as it expands, the bread's not tearing the surface. It's got these expansion points that it allows it to rise. Alright, here we go. It's been about half an hour. I've got the oven heat right up. It's not that slow, it's just I want that stone to be nice and hot right through. So here we go. Okay, put the dough out. And baste. Looking good. Okay. Now with the slices, they're nice deep cuts, you see. Okay, and down we go. Alright, here we go. So this gets hot when you first open it. In she goes. In goes the water. Closed. Alright, here we go. Just on another note, I've searched for many decent bread knives. This, there it is there, Baccarat one. Probably the best knife I've found so far. Nice and soft as it goes through. No sticky points, so it's cooked right through. And there we are. A wonderful bread.